iron deficiency is a common side effect of untreated celiac disease. So basically 1 in 20 cases of low iron are actually because of undiagnosed celiac disease.
Welcome to the Healthy Celiac Show. I'm your host, Belinda Whelan from belindawhelan.com, and here you will learn to live your very best life with celiac disease. So we are going to be talking all about health-related topics because you, my friend, are more than just a woman with celiac disease. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss an episode, and welcome to the show.
Welcome back to this week's episode. Now, here in Australia, it is actually Celiac Awareness Week. And what that means is throughout Australia, there are many people raising more awareness for celiac disease and in the hopes of basically letting people know more about what celiac disease is. And then hopefully from that, more and more people will get diagnosed. Because here in Australia, 1 in 70 Australians have celiac disease, but roughly 4 out of 5 actually remain undiagnosed, which is it's actually a lot of people. So when we think about it, where is this unawareness coming from and why aren't doctors testing? Why aren't more doctors screening for celiac disease when people go to the doctors with health issues? So if we can do our bit and we can raise awareness and increase people's, what they know about celiac disease and what they've heard about it, the more people talk about it, the more we can help others and make a big difference in other people's lives. Because I don't know about you, but for me personally, ever since I got diagnosed with celiac disease, I've been able to completely transform my life and my health. And I'm super grateful that I was diagnosed eventually. So I want to help as many people as possible get the results that they need. So you can help by sharing information on your social media accounts. You can talk to people. You can share this podcast. You can talk to people in your medical professional areas, whether that be your doctor, even your dentist, anyone that you have access to. The more that we talk about it, the more awareness that we raise, which is fantastic. Now, Celiac Australia this week is having a big emphasis on iron deficiency. And the reason for this is iron deficiency is a common side effect of untreated celiac disease. So basically 1 in 20 cases of low iron are actually because of undiagnosed celiac disease. So we are trying to get the message out there that if people have got low iron, which can lead to fatigue and many other issues, that the doctors are testing for celiac disease. They're not just putting people on iron supplements. They're actually taking it one step further and they're making sure that they're testing for celiac disease. So this is truly an important message that we need to get out there. Now, celiac disease causes many side effects, as you probably know, but if you're tuning into this episode because someone shared it with you and they want you to understand celiac disease a little bit more, there are many, many side effects, and there's actually a couple of hundred known side effects from celiac disease. And some of the more, common or well-known ones are things such as fatigue, diarrhea, migraines, brain fog, things like that. But it can also cause body aches and pains and even hair loss in some people. So if there's people out there that have got symptoms that their doctor just can't put their finger on and can't work out what's causing it, it is definitely worth testing for celiac disease and ruling that out from day one. Because the quicker people get a diagnosis, the quicker they can get the support that they need. So if they can rule that out straight away, that's wonderful. They can move on to something else. However, if they can see that that person has got the genetic marker for celiac disease, then they can take that further and help that person either get a diagnosis or rule it out, as I said. So very, very important that people know more about the symptoms and know when to get help. Now, celiac disease is an autoimmune disease. It is not an allergy. It is not just an intolerance to food. It is actually an autoimmune disease. So what happens with someone that has celiac disease, when they eat gluten, their body literally attacks itself. So we have millions and millions of what's called villi in your small intestine. So everybody has them. But for someone with celiac disease, when they eat gluten, those tiny, tiny little villi in their small intestine get damaged. And the problem with this is when those villi are damaged, the person with celiac disease no longer absorbs nutrients from their food. Okay, so when they eat, the goodness from their food is passing straight through their small intestine instead of being absorbed, and all the beautiful nutrients that their body needs to thrive and be healthy are no longer working. So the food, the nutrients, it's just passing straight by, and they are unable to feel good because, as you probably know, when you eat well and you have all the nutrients that your body needs, you feel good. If you don't have that, then it causes all those issues of sluggishness and tiredness and anemia and things like that. So it's very, very important that people with celiac disease don't eat gluten. Okay, so gluten is found in a number of different foods, many, many different foods. But the main thing we need to look out for are wheat, oats, barley, and rye. Okay, there's a list of other names that they go by, but for just this episode, we'll focus on those. And lastly, the only way to treat celiac disease is a strict gluten-free diet for life, as at the time of this recording, there is no cure for celiac disease. There is absolutely no cure whatsoever. We just have to eat gluten-free. So if someone has shared this episode with you, they are probably sharing it with you because they want you to understand how important it is for them to consume gluten-free food and for you to keep them safe. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please share it. Please get the word out there. Let more people know about celiac disease and help us to spread our message and to be heard. So thank you for listening, and I will talk with you next week. Take care. Bye. If you enjoyed this episode, head to belindawhelan.com to get yourself a free copy of my exclusive ebook, 11 Mistakes People Make Going Gluten-Free Living with Celiac Disease.